Africa, rise. You are blessed. Today, we are going to look at my personal story. This episode, I named it The Blood That Still Speaks. My story, our inheritance. Before we begin, a word, or shall I say a warning. This episode describes colonial violence, including sexual violence and the desecration of human remains. If you need to pause, I will be here when you return. Feel free to pause. Second, let me offer you a compass. If you inherited disruption, this may stir deep recognition. That weight is not weakness. It is inheritance and responsibility. If you inherited favorable systems, this may stir discomfort. That discomfort is not accusation, it is invitation. Let's talk. Same story, different entry point. Neither of you is being asked to leave. Because none of us here today caused what happened in the past. We are all living in the effect of our ancestors. So, let's together take up the reconciliation lens. Now, let's begin. Between 1904 and 1908, an entire people were nearly erased from the face of the earth. The Herero and Nama Genocide that took place in German South Africa, now known as Namibia, since independence in 1990. But this is not just a story to me. I carry this story in my blood. I am the descendant of both the oppressed and the oppressor. So when I speak, I'm not speaking from a distance. I'm speaking from inheritance. The question is not only what happened. The question is, who will speak for the blood that still speaks? In our pilot, I briefly mentioned to you about my two great-great-grandparents. My maternal side, my great-grandparents fled to the genocide on foot across the Transvaal, carrying nothing but life itself. They walked into Botswana barefooted, a journey that took years. They lived in Botswana, Nahalapshe, for decades. My great-great-grandmother, Christiana, returned around 1970 with my grandmother, Erica, and my mother, Albino, who was around 11 years, and my uncle Simpson, who was a toddler back then. I also mentioned that I was born 7 years later, the first in my family to be born back in the homeland, then known as Southwest Africa, Namibia, under apartheid. I mentioned the classification on my birth certificate, Bantu, a category that was not meant to honor, but it was a label, politicized and weaponized, that the colonial and apartheid era used for racial and administrative segregation. These were policies like Bantu Education Act, like Bantu Authorities, or Bantu Homelands, and so forth. We also mentioned that on my paternal side, my great-great-grandmother, she was kept in a German household where she was taken advantage of by my great-great-great-grandfather. And that is how my German lineage entered my blood. My great-great-great-grandfather was Stats Heinrich Benecke. So, I'm here today carrying a wound. And that wound, that displacement, is not mine alone. It is Africa's wound. The pattern continued. It showed up in my own father, in how he took advantage of those weaker than himself, including my mother, including myself, and many others. This will be a story for another day. Stay tuned. Now, I'm not excusing my debt. I'm only naming the inheritance visited from generation to generation. So when I speak as someone whose identity carry the memory. What was supposed to be contradiction, God had turned it into the ministry of reconciliation. My story does not end in Namibia. It continues here in South Africa. I mentioned in a pilot that South Africa, despite its own painful history and wounds, forgave and opened its doors to millions of us across this continent and beyond. So, I have lived here over 2 decades. I raised and schooled my sons here. My daughter was born here in South Africa. I have witnessed Ubuntu in this country, not as a concept, but as a lived reality. When I named my foundation, Thank You, South Africa, it is not branding. It is not testimony. It is not branding. It is testimony. It is gratitude. It is prophecy. South Africa, thank you. Receive your flowers. You have done well, Rainbow Nation. Before we speak about death, we must speak about life. There was land, there was identity, there was order. People knew who they were. Let me be clear. Division is not diversity. Division is imposed. Division creates superiority and inferiority. Before interference, we were never divided. We were different as Africans. Difference is God's design. Division is man's distortion. Then something happened. Across Africa, something was taken, and for many, it was never fully restored, never really fully named, never really fully exposed. What we live today did not begin with us. We inherited it. An inheritance is never just money or land. We inherited behavior. We inherited wounds. We inherited the way we see ourselves and even the way we see others. That painful past, if it is not addressed, continues into generations until someone confronts it. So for now, just know what you carry did not start with you. In summary, when we talk about generational transfers, we are really talking about a multi-layered inheritance system that primarily manifests in money, skills, relationships, values, genes, and even wounds. Effective generational planning will need to address all of this, not just a financial or a material way. We will go deeper in future episodes on this, so stay tuned. Like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell, because this is your continent, and her deepest conversations have only just begun. So, we must be honest, we must be truthful, and we must be vulnerable. Men, including boy children or the boy child, were killed. Their skulls were separated from their lifeless bodies, and the women were forced to witness unimaginable violence against their husbands and their boy children, and to live with the trauma of what they had seen and endured. The girl child and the mother, if they survived, were left carrying devastation, trauma, and deep loss, as they were forced to participate in the packaging of these skulls, which were shipped across the ocean to Germany to serve as scientific proof for a racist ideology. German colonial authorities, military doctors, and their anthropologists believed that by measuring skulls and studying physical features, they could scientifically demonstrate the biological superiority of Europeans over Africans. For a whole century, those skulls were kept in German hospitals, universities, and museums as trophies and proof of a master race. The German government did not begin to return them until 2011, with further repatriations in 2018. To the Herero and the Nama people today, those bones are not artifacts. They are the remains of ancestors who were murdered and then dehumanized, even in death. Their return is a small but essential part of acknowledging the truth of the genocide and the dignity of the victims. This was not a neutral scientific act. It was part of a global colonial project to create racial hierarchies. The goal was to prove that Africans were nature people and that Europeans were civilized people, thereby justifying colonial rule, land theft, and even extermination as a civilizing mission. I have both blood running in my veins, the German and the Herero, white and black, if that will make better sense. So, even in death, there was no dignity for the Herero and Nama people. They were not mourned. The living could not mourn their loved ones, because the living Herero and Nama still had a man standing with a gun in their face. So, this is not distant history. It shapes our environment, our behaviors, even our DNA. Check out the word epigenetics. That past is still present in inequality, in land conversation, in the quiet question many still ask: who am I after what was taken from us? We will delve deeper into this in episode 4 or episode 5. Here is where we must shift We cannot inherit pain and pass it forward unchanged. Yes, what happened was devastatingly wrong. But now the question is, what are we going to do with it? Are we going to stay in anger, in self-pity? Are we going to keep talking with no action? Are we going to keep in revenge? Or choose something different? Take a different approach, a different route? Africa, can we navigate this differently? The African child is not starting from nothing. We are starting from memory, from resilience. We are starting from survival. Now is the time to rise, Africa. Not in anger, but in responsibility. We have been talking about Namibia, but if you are listening from Lagos, from Nairobi, or from Johannesburg, from Cape Town, from Durban, ask yourself, how many children in your city were born in another African country? South Africa alone hosts over 200,000 of them statistically. They are learning isiZulu alongside Shona. They are writing exams in Tswana classrooms, except when the fragments of xenophobia rises. They are told to go home. But where is home really? And more urgently, whose responsibility are these children? This should not be a South African problem only. South Africa says every child has the right to school. I have lived here long enough to confirm this is truthful. We share wounds, the same wounds. We share languages that bleed into one another. We share ancestors who were moved, forced, displaced, broken, and still rebuilt. So here is the continental core. What is our shared responsibility towards the children being raised in countries that are not their parents' birthplace? Are they their problem, or are they our problem? Are they Africa's problem? I tend to believe they are Africa's problem. Because if the African Union means anything, if Pan-Africanism means anything beyond the flag and the speech, then a child from Kinshasa raised in Cape Town is not a foreign child. A child from Zimbabwe and Congo in Namibia is not a foreigner. It's an African child. It's the child of the soil. Aren't they? Now, let's hear this carefully. This podcast, this season, this episode is not a lecture. It is a container. You might not understand what displacement means or what it feels like. You were not chased from home by circumstances beyond your control. Perhaps you did not learn a new flag before you learned your own. But you might have a friend. You might have a mother. Maybe your grandparents, or your neighbor, or the child who sits in the back of the classroom and does not speak until called upon. This platform is not just my voice. If you carry a story of displacement, of waking up in a country that is not the one you dreamt in, of being asked, where are you really from? Of watching a parent cry because the asylum papers were denied again. Your story belongs here. If you are a teacher in South Africa classroom with 12 countries represented among 30 children, your story belongs here. If you are a parent who crossed a border with nothing but a child on your hip and a prayer in your chest, your story belongs here. If you are a nurse in a maternity ward and the mother screaming in labor does not speak your language, does not speak English or isiZulu or Afrikaans, and you hold her hand anyway, and you are the first face a displaced child sees when they enter this world, your story belongs here. If you are a white person, born on African soil, buried ancestors here, yet told you don't belong because of your skin, or told you cannot speak because of your history, your story belongs here. Healing does not happen in silence. It never has. It never will. So this is the invitation. Not to listen, though listen you should, but to speak. So send us your words, your letters, your memory, your anger, your forgiveness, your repentance, your frustration, your confusion. Send us your truth. Because Africa did not break in one day. So Africa will not be built in one way. It will heal in many. Starting now. Starting with you and me. I refused, and I still refuse, to sit in the wound. I refuse to inherit pain and pass it forward unchanged. So, I choose to build. And this is where Thank You South Africa was born. Not as an organization, not as charity, but as a response. A response to history, a response to displacement, a response to the quiet crisis of identity, playing out in classrooms, in homes, and in the hearts of African children across borders. Because when a child is displaced, it is not only geography that is affected. It is identity. It is belonging that is questioned. It is memory that begins to fade. So, through Thank You South Africa, yes, we support education. We assist with legal identity applications. Yes, we open access. But that is not the full story. We are restoring identity. We are restoring dignity. We are restoring a sense of place in a continent that has been divided but never really disconnected. Because a child who knows who they are does not rise the same way as a child who has been made to forget. And then there is the work that stretches beyond today. The Sovereign Africa Institute 2063 is not an initiative. It is a generational assignment, a long-term blueprint for raising a generation of Africans who will not inherit this continent fragmented, but will rebuild it consciously, and will do this in alignment with a vision that is already written, a vision carried by the African Union. Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. A vision of a united Africa, a self-sustaining Africa, an Africa that is driven by its own people and positioned as a global force. We are not separate from that vision. We are responding to it. We are contributing to it. We are carrying our portion of it. Because the rebuilding of Africa will not come from one government. It will not come from one institution. It will not come from one voice. It will come from alignment from Africans across borders who recognize that what was broken across the continent must be restored across the continent through Thank You South Africa and the Sovereign Africa Institute 2063. We are raising builders, not just graduates, not just professionals. We are raising builders. Children who will move across this continent, learn from its regions, understand its wealth and resources, and return not as strangers to Africa, but as owners of her future. So this is not charity. Let that be clear. This is continental solidarity, rooted in truth, rooted in memory, rooted in responsibility. Because a child from Kinshasa in Johannesburg, a child from Harare in Windhoek, a child from Luanda in Gaborone is not a foreign child. They are African child. In South Africa, you are not accidental in this story. You are a central point. You have opened your doors, you have carried the weight, you have held space for generations of Africans, often without recognition. So when we say thank you, South Africa, it is not branding. It is acknowledgement. It is honor. It is truth. And now we move from gratitude to responsibility. I have chosen to build. The question is not whether the work needs to be done. The question is, will you build with me? Difference is God's design. Division is man's distortion. This is one story, but this is not the only one. Africa remembers, and now Africa responds. Before we close, an invitation. Permit me to ask you something. Do you know the names of your ancestors 4 generations back? Your great-great-grandparents, both paternal and maternal? Not every one of us do. Colonial records did not keep our names carefully, and sometimes the silence and the pain was so heavy that names were never passed on. If you do know them, please say their names today, out loud, in a car, in a kitchen, in your prayer language. Say them. If you do not know them, speak this instead. I honor the ones whose names were not kept. I carry their blood, and I will live in a way that makes them proud. This is not ritual. Honoring your ancestors is not worshiping them. This is restoration. Because a people who remember their dead, even without names, are a people who will not be erased, who will not crumble, and who will not be defeated. Send us their names if you wish. or keep them in your chest. Either way, do not let the silence have the final word. Africa remembers, and now Africa responds. God bless you.